Many call Vietnam the last of the great Asian industrial dragons. It's a country of contrasts, an export powerhouse with over 100 million people and a GDP of $430 billion, the fourth largest in Southeast Asia. However, it's also a middle-income nation, and to most global investors, an under-owned frontier. It's a tourist hotspot rich in history, yet a young, rapidly modernizing nation that has experienced revolutionary changes in just a few decades.
I think the really big question is whether or not investors' perceptions over the last 10 to 20 years have kept pace with the radical change on the ground.
I'm Dominic Scriven. I'm founder and chairman of Dragon Capital, an investment firm based in Vietnam. Vietnam has been an enormously successful example of a developing country. I was a fund manager in the 1980s, and we did a trip from Hong Kong to here. We hit one end and we drove all the way, trained all the way down to the other end of the country. The journey itself was remarkable. In those days, the train from north to south took something like 2.5 days. Average speed, 16 kilometers an hour, on narrow French era gauge.
You've been here since 1991. What's changed since 1991?
All of this. Bridges, buildings. This is the expansion of Ho Chi Minh City. When I first came here, this was forest. Scrub, forest, mangrove. You certainly didn't have any of these buildings.
Vietnam has experienced extraordinary changes since its opening in 1986. That year, inflation was running at 582%, making the country the poorest in the world. Change was necessary, and this change came with a reform known as Đổi Mới. Under this reform, Vietnamese GDP grew by 7.9% annually from 1990 to 1996, faster than any other country except China. In 1999, the new enterprise law was enacted, and within 5 years, a total of 160,000 new businesses were registered. By 2007, Vietnam had become a member of the World Trade Organization.
One of the things you hear anecdotally from people who travel to Vietnam in the early days is the prevalence of bicycles. Vietnam is a bicycle population. And of course, now you go on the streets, they're teeming with motorbikes.
The key transformations in Vietnam are urbanization, digitization, and expanding the transport infrastructure. Between 2012 and 2022, over 1,000 kilometers of roads were built, 10 times the number built in the preceding decade. There's been a substantial increase in port infrastructure, as well as urban projects like this, the Hanoi Metro, which now has 2 lines. But there's still a lot more to do, not least a proper north-south highway and expansion of the rail network.
The people advantage. Most people understand that the demographics in Asia are probably a lot better than they are in Europe, but how does that translate into something that you can build an investment proposition on? That is, I think, an important question. Demography is impressive, but there are challenges.
Vietnam is a young nation with a high proportion of workers under the age of 30. Many of these are educated. Vietnamese young people have high levels of proficiency in English, science and maths, compared to nearly all their Asian neighbours, including Malaysia. That's in part powered by the increasing urbanisation rate that has now hit 40%. These urban markets, in turn, power the rising middle class, with GDP per capita now averaging over $4,000. One final measure of greater affluence is that by the end of 2023, Vietnam had over 19,000 millionaires, a 98% increase over the past decade, making Vietnam the country with the fastest growth rate in millionaires globally.
My name is Tyler Nguyen. I'm currently the Chief Market Strategist from HSC.
What is Vietnam's demographic advantage?
Vietnam is having quite a big population. The average age in Vietnam is actually quite low, only about 32 to 33 years old. So therefore, we are actually having a big advantage of a young and dynamic, enthusiastic, and also very big population compared to regional peers. The average income GDP per capita in Vietnam is only about 4,000 plus US dollar per annum. So therefore, with that low base and yet a young and big population, then we are actually quite good at growing into a consumerism economy.
In big cities such as Ho Chi Minh City, massive shopping malls have emerged, many of which appear to be owned by giant Japanese or Korean retail brands. And as with consumers in most countries, revenues for luxury goods are booming. Nowhere more so than in the jewellery sector, where a company called P&J, a locally listed business, is a major player.
My name is Thao Tran and I'm the Vice Chairperson of Phu Nhuon Jewelry, P&J. We are a leading manufacturer and retailer of jewelry in Vietnam. Traditionally, Vietnamese people consider jewelry as one of the store of wealth. However, what P&J has observed and been able to capture the opportunity is that more and more people put on the aspirational value and also the fashion aspect of jewelry. So nowadays, for P&J customers, when they purchase jewelry, it's for the emotional value. For us, the most important customer segment is the middle income class. According to the definition that if you earn more than $11 per day, then you are in the middle income class. Currently, Vietnam have more than 40 million people in this segment, and the forecast is that in the next decade, that number is going to grow to 75 million.
Let's be honest, Vietnam is still a communist society, like China next door. That does trouble investors. Should they be concerned?
Visiting a city like Hanoi in the north, the communist influence is obvious, not least with the endless red flags exhorting workers and citizens on every street corner.
In terms of capitalism and communism, I think that term is only a term nowadays. So Vietnam is right now, I would say personally, from my point of view, is a market economy.
Now, most people would say that this is a country of great stability from the very top to the very street level. So stability, that's I think the number one priority of most people in Vietnam, because of course the older population, people my age and your age, we clearly remember what happens in the absence of stability.
I suppose the $64 trillion question is, in an era of new trade wars, whether or not Vietnam is more vulnerable, precisely because it's so export orientated, so open to the world economy.
Vietnam's economy is increasingly open. Free trade agreements with 55 countries have led to a significant surge in foreign direct investment over the past few decades, driving export growth. The dollar value of all Vietnamese exports has increased sevenfold since 2007, with South Korea serving as a crucial partner and a significant source of considerable inward investment, particularly from companies like Samsung. Additionally, the United States plays a key role as well. Vietnam ranks as America's 8th largest trade partner, with especially robust growth in the electronic components industry.
Vietnam is a very open economy. The total trade over GDP is about 200%. So therefore, export is extremely important for the economy in Vietnam. Part of the FDI contributions are actually electronics and related products. Most of your Samsung phone right now, they're all made in Vietnam, or let's say AirPods from Apple, is actually all made in Vietnam.
One area of growth is in the tech sector, with the most significant player, FPT, the largest business by market cap on the local stock exchange. This tech combine has divisions that span everything from retail to tech solutions and data centers.
My name is Juan, Nguyen Khai Juan. I'm the CFO and COO of FPT Software. When I joined the company 21 years ago, we were a small team of slightly more than 100 people. I still remember we closing the year with $1.5 million US. And that's about 2003. Last year, after basically 20 years, we achieved our first $1 billion US. That's also marked the tenfold of revenue in the last 10 years. From 2013, we achieved our first 100, and 23, we achieved our first 1 billion. Basically 10 times in the last 10 years.
The tech services business unit of the FPT Group is one of the fastest growing. Its footprint is now global, and partners include everyone from Microsoft to Nvidia.
At FPT Software, we are focusing more on the global market. In total, FPT Group, we have 80,000 employees. At FPT Software, we cover 33,000 employees. Globally, we are operating in 31 countries. Among the 33,000, 7,000 outside Vietnam and 3,000 foreigners.
FPT is far from being the only tech business in Vietnam. As the sector grows in places like Ho Chi Minh City, they're already talking about the emergence of what is being called by some a Silicon Delta.
I believe this is really an emerging industry here in Vietnam, and it's not only about FPT. There are other players like VNPT, Viettel, VNG, CMC.
Most investors tend to be underinvested in Vietnam. So why would you choose to put more money into Vietnam now?
The primary stock market in Ho Chi Minh City has outperformed over the last couple of years according to MSCI data, achieving a 7.9% annualised return from the period 2003 to 2023, compared to just under 3% for the MSCI EM index. However, Vietnam remains a frontier market, although local investor interest is surging, which has helped boost market liquidity as measured by daily market activity.
My name is Ngô Thanh Thảo. I'm the co-portfolio manager of the Vietnam Enterprise Investment Limited.
So Vietnam is not an emerging market, it's actually a frontier market. Why is that important and will it change?
Yes, so Vietnam is still in the frontier market status due to the difficulties in the acceptability for foreign investors. However, the situation will be changed soon. We expected that Vietnam would be included in the FTSE secondary emerging market soon, maybe this year. And this will help attract the inflow from the foreign investor. And currently now we think that Vietnam is under-owned by the investor due to the frontier status.
Local interest is evident at investor events like this in Hanoi. Over 350 predominantly young people pack the hall to hear about local investment opportunities. What helps, of course, is that local investors can only invest locally. But that doesn't diminish their enthusiasm.
Tôi nghĩ rằng là trong thời gian tới thì thị trường chứng khoán của Việt Nam sẽ rất là hấp dẫn, bởi vì là tôi thấy rằng là có hai lý do chính. Thứ nhất là về tiềm năng tăng trưởng của GDP của Việt Nam rất là hứa hẹn trong những năm tới. Mà có những cái dấu hiệu rất là quyết liệt từ phía chính phủ.
Vietnam is clearly at a crucial point in its development. This very open economy faces obvious challenges, not least from a volatile geopolitical and trade environment.
Besides the challenge from the global headwinds, for example, the Trump policy, we also see there's a challenge for the Vietnam is overcome the middle income level in the
middle income trap.
Yeah, middle income trap in the coming time.
The biggest challenge is the ability of the public sector to keep up with demands that come from the unleashing of the private sectors. How the country tackles this process is going to set the direction of travel for the next 20 years.
Vietnam, the last of the industrial dragons, appears to be at a crossroads between frontier and emerging market, striving to ascend the value chain and avoid the middle income trap. Challenges and opportunities are many and varied.